Alright, where in the heck is it? It's not it. What the heck? Oh, eh. Those need to be worked on. Let me see. Oh, I haven't seen this thing for a while. Yep. Alright. Where is it? Where is it? Aha! Alright. Now that we have the material we need, I can get started with this. Alright, YouTube. I'm just going to do a little video here, I think, on a little bit of a brief history on the 30-40 Krag-Jorgensen rifle and the 1903 Springfield rifles and the 30-06 cartridge. This is in response to let's say some recent videos on one of the mega channels, as I like to call them. And you know, I'm not going to mention which channel it was, but because I mean, it's a great channel, obviously, and I watch it avidly. But I do know there was a little bit of incorrect information put out, and so I basically want to kind of set the record straight. And that information was claiming the 30-40 Krag cartridge. Yo, I think there's a gun in that ad somewhere. The 30-40 cartridge, as adopted by the U.S. military back in 1890. Damn, is this Hustler or is this Shotgun News? Anyway, that the 30-40 cartridge was the first cartridge adopted by the U.S. military with the Spitzer bullets. Yeah, I hate to say it, but that information is incorrect. And I will be not only using this article, but several internet references, which I'll list at the bottom of the video here. Which the 30-06 was actually the first cartridge adopted by the U.S. military with a Spitzer or pointed bullet. So, to get the whole story straight, we have to go back, even further back in history, to a once upon a time story. Okay, and that once upon a time starts with the ending of the Franco-Prussian War, which is roughly 1876, I want to guess, where the French army was humiliated. I just said French army and humiliated in the same sentence. That, talk about redundancy. Anyway, the French were humiliated by the Prussians, and in their humiliation, they decided to, well, we're going to start an arms race. Basically, they did a lot. They put a, started emphasizing defense and put a lot of money into research. And of course, well, you have to think about that time. Back at that time, that's when basically all the world's militaries, including our own, had essentially single-shot breech-loading rifles as their standard military issue. So that, of course, other countries as well needed to hop on the bandwagon all over Europe and eventually reach the United States. In Europe, you had the French came out with the 8mm Lebel, which was kind of like the forerunner to everything. The British came out with the 303 cartridge, and the Russians with the 7.62 by 54R. What do all three of these cartridges have in common? Roughly 30 to 32 caliber, and they're all rimmed. Okay, the Germans, on the other hand, they decided, in their own research, they came up with, of course, the world famous, everybody knows by now, Mauser. In German, and there are certain other countries like Spain adopted the Mauser. Denmark and Norway, in the meantime, they developed the Krag-Jorgensen. Okay, and again, I think their cartridge was also a rimmed cartridge as well. Now, one thing in common that all of these rim cartridges had, they all fired a round nose bullet. Bullet development was not yet caught up at that point in time. So anyway, to make an even longer story shorter, what happened when the U.S. Had the trials, to include Krag-Jorgensen's, Mausers, everything else, we went with the Krag-Jorgensen, and we developed the 30-40 Krag. Now, at that time, also smokeless powder. Oh, thank you again, French. I think the French developed smokeless powder. Anyway, it developed the 30-40 cartridge, again rimmed, okay, and firing a 220 grain round nose slug. So anyway, as time moves on, of course, the U.S. and Spain get involved in the Spanish-American War. All right, the Spaniards have their nice 7mm Mausers firing a 175 grain round nose cartridge, and we with the 30-40 Krags. However, due to the strength of the Mauser action, the Spanish cartridge is able to be loaded at much higher pressure, therefore has a much flatter trajectory. Another advantage the Mauser had over the Krag was the fact that you were able to load it via stripper clips, like the one seen right here. So, after the war, and the U.S. had experience with the 30-40 Krag, not only against the Spanish, but also in the Boxer Rebellion and in the Philippine insurrection in the Philippines. So, after the war, we recognized the U.S. attempted, I don't know if it was after the war or before the war, anyway, at some point during when the U.S. adopted the Krag, we had tried the Krag as their standard military arm. We attempted to increase the velocity of the standard 220 grain cartridge. However, that proved to be an abysmal failure. What happened was the Krag action, with its one single lone locking lug, that cracks started developing on many of the locking lug, and the metal gilding around the 220 grain around those slug would peel off in the barrel at those higher pressures and the higher velocity. So obviously a 30-40 Krag, the cartridge and the rifle were not going to be able to be retained as the U.S. cartridge, because we saw obviously that in comparison to the rest of the world's cartridges, it was lacking in many departments. So we, again, less than about 10 years after we adopted the Krag, in 1903 we had more military trials, and of course we adopted the infamous 1903 Springfield. All right, so the cartridge developed with the Springfield, we decided to go with a rimless design, but the load still retained the round nose 220 grain slug. This is known as the 3003. 1903 Springfield 3003. Okay, got it? All right. Okay, we decided to go with the rimless cartridge, not only because, well, that's what the Spanish had, the Mausers, but the rimless cartridge is much easier to feed and load in an integral box magazine. However, shortly after we adopted the 3003 and began production of the 1903 Springfield rifle, chambered in 3003, technology changes. That's when spitzer bullets were starting to make an impact. Again, all the other world's militaries were adopting them, so we decided to tag along. And in order to, I'm not sure of the exact reasons why, but for the 3003 to be modified to fire a spitzer type bullet, the case length had to be shortened by like 1/10 or something like that of an inch. So that slightly modified case with the spitzer bullet then became the 30-06, and any existing 1903 rifles that were already issued or out amongst the troops were recalled and rebarreled, or rechambered I should say, for the shorter case cartridge and the 1906 in the 30-06 cartridge I should say. Anyway, again, by this whole thing, I don't mean any disrespect to that mega channel. I'm not going to name it. You guys can figure it out. But I just wanted to make sure that, you know, the real poop was out there. So, anyway, there are also a couple of facets of the 3040 Krag design that were carried over into the Springfield rifle. All right, and one of them is right there, and I'll put some footage up of my 03 and or 03A3 where you can see it. One is the magazine cutoff switch right there, and the theory behind that is because when the Krag was adopted, you had the old school Army institution line of thinking, where, oh my god, you can't give a soldier this many rounds to be able to fire at once. He'll just simply waste his ammo. And not to mention, let's just say the defense budget during that time, in between wars, was extremely, extremely frugal. So that was one aspect of the Krag that was carried over onto the 1903, and you know, still retained. And another piece that was carried over from the 3040 Krag to the 03 Springfield is this crazy, goofy cocking knob. I guarantee you that cocking knob, by accidental shootings, probably killed quite a few GIs, because I don't understand the purpose of it. I mean, really. You know? So you'd put a round in the chamber. Alright? Put a round in the chamber. And then, well, you have a round in the chamber, but you don't want it to be ready to fire. So you would pull the trigger and gently ease the cocking handle forward. And be sure to be very gentle so as not to strike the primer on the cartridge too hard, otherwise it would discharge. Isn't that the purpose of what a safety's for? You know, really. Then why have a safety if that's what you're going to have? Anyway, that was the other main carryover from the 3040 Krag to the 03 Springfield. Alright, I've rambled on enough, and I got to clean up this mess. Just trying to sort out one of my junk drawers. Alright, talk to you later, YouTube. Have a good one. In this clip, you can see the magazine cutoff switch there. There's in the opposition. You also see a short view of the cocking knob right there at the finger webbing. And here is a little bit of a closer view of the cocking knob.